Yo, 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 what it do? What it be? It's your boy, A-N-T, repping the game gang. You know we don't play none of that. And if you a lame, you can't hang, all of that. And I'm back with another one of my POVs of history. So let's go ahead and start with that. We got Vlad the Impaler, Richard Lionheart, and Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh yeah. Now what do all these men have in common, you might ask? If it's not obvious to you, it's that they all have cool nicknames. I don't know where, when, how, or who started the tradition of giving out nicknames, but throughout history, and we've had some really cool nicknames, but for the most part the trend has kind of fallen off in recent times. Really the nicknames are reserved for pro athletes, maybe rappers sometimes. We don't really get like dope generals like Stonewall Jackson anymore or anything like that. I mean, or really we don't get Soleiman the Magnificent, word to Assassin's Creed, or you could be, there's Attila the Hun, the aka the Scourge of God. Like what? That's a dope fucking nickname, yo. But there is one man whose military prowess and diplomacy has become legendary, and this man made being great his namesake, not just some little cheap adjective that you could throw on any leader or military general. No, none of that. I'm talking, of course, about Alexander the Third of Macedon, aka Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander the Great was born either July 20th or July 21st, 356 BC, in Pella, Macedon. His father was Philip II, king of Macedon. His mother was Olympias, daughter of Neoptolemus. I know I'm probably butchering that. Neoptolemus I, king of Epirus. And Alexander's royal lineage had already ensured that he would have some great responsibilities, and he would be also granted some of the best amenities that life could offer. He learned how to play the lyre, which is pretty much like a Greek banjo. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the Greeks were low-key on some redneck shit back in the day, but he learned how to hunt. He did hand-to-hand combat training and horseback riding. And I mean, until he was 16, he had a tutor named Leonidas. Not the same Spartan leader or none of that, but it was either like an uncle or like a cousin of his mom or some shit like that. But he was an older male relative that was very wise and strict. And then at 13, he also became a student of Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle, the Aristotle type shit. And all it took was, his father basically bargained with Aristotle, like, hey, if you teach my son philosophy and how the world works, kind of, or what you one of the smartest, if not the smartest man in all of Greece. I'll rebuild your town. Yes, the town that I fucked up. Yeah, I'll rebuild that for you if you teach my son, type shit. So from 13, he was a student, a pupil of Aristotle. So there's a story of when Alexander was 10, his dad bought a horse that supposedly couldn't be mounted, yet Alexander somehow understood that the horse was scared of its own shadow. He took his time with the horse and then tamed it. Now, I don't know if the horse was really scared of its own shadow. Is that common in horses? I don't be around horses like that, so y'all let me know or something. But I don't know if that's just like a Greek figure of speech or something. I don't know what that was. But his dad saw him tame the horse, and he was basically beaming with pride. And he told his son, according to legend, like, you got to find a kingdom that's big enough for your ambitions. Macedon ain't big enough for the shit that's destined for you, my boy. So, despite his pride in his son, Philip and Alexander, they had kind of a strained relationship. Philip didn't really raise Alexander. His mom and her family had much more influence in Alexander's early life, but as he matured, it was clear that he was going to need some male guidance because he wanted to become a warrior, and he was the son of a king, so he was kind of like an heir in some respect or some regard. So, I mean, he was kind of like he was like Trey in Menace to Society, he had to go live with his pops type shit to learn how to become a man. So when Alexander turned 16, his tutelage under Aristotle had ended, and his dad left to go to war against the Thracians. I think that's an alien race. I think it's the Thracians. I don't know. But they were revolting, and he left Alexander in charge as their, he was their heir. But during the time, another revolt of Thracians, however you say it, that took place near Macedon. And 16-year-old Alexander, he was quick. He mounted up and put a belt to their ass, colonized they shit, and named a city named Alexandropolis, where they block used to be. Keyword used to be. Do your homework on used to be. Can you imagine a teenager pulling up, not just your block, but in your capital city, turning up, laying the law down, sliding on your squad like the motherfucking Winter X Games and shit, and before you know it, the city is named after him. And now he millie rocking on your old block, but it's not really your block. It's Alexander Ave now. Like, it's his city now. And this is why I for real love history. The shit was really nuts. The shit pretty much happened just like that. Maybe a little bit embellishment on my part, but for the most part, that's how it happened. So then in 338, Philip and Alexander teamed up on some like Lion King shit, I guess, and I guess that would make Aristotle Zazu. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Aristotle, I didn't mean to do you like that, but I digress. Together they marched through Thermopylae and made alliances with most of the Greek city-states except Sparta. Let me just throw that out there. Now, these alliances emboldened Philip to announce his plans to attack the Persian Empire. And during that same year, Philip returned to Pella, the capital of Macedon, and he fell in love with his seventh wife, Cleopatra Eurydice. And a year later, in 337, he would marry her in a lavish ceremony. And let me just point out again, this was Phil's seventh wife, and she was 20, and he was around, I don't know, 50. So yeah, as much as things change throughout history, some things change the same, or some things stay the same. You know, what can I say? But Alexander was in attendance at the wedding, and according to Plutarch, a famous Greek philosopher and historian, this wedding was a real turning point in Alexander and Philip's relationship. Now, the story goes that Cleopatra's uncle, Attalus, now he was a little tipsy, he was a little faded at the function, and he was trying to say that hopefully Philip and Cleopatra would have a beautiful, full-blooded Macedonian boy to finally have a rightful heir to the throne. Right? Now, Alexander wasn't going for none of that disrespectful shit, and he right off the bat, he threw a cup at Attalus and said, "Oh, you want a rightful heir? Well, then what the fuck am I then, bitch? I'm right here. Fuck you talking about rightful heirs, pussy. Like, you trying to pimp out your niece for a little clout, you fucking peon." And I might embellish a little bit about what I say about what he said, but I'm pretty sure if it was modern times, I wouldn't be far off from that's what was said. Now, Philip was realizing Alex was killing the vibe, so he tried to pull out his little tool, his attitude adjuster and shit. He tried to pull out his spear. They didn't have guns back then, so he pulled out the spear and he tried to scare Alexander, tried to flex and shit. He was either drunk, he was off the shits at his own wedding or something. There might have been like a banana peel or something on the floor. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. He might have slipped off that. But while he was trying to, flex with his tool, he slipped trying to get to Alexander or scare him, right? But Alexander, his wit was as sharp as any sword or spear, and he looked at his drunk ass daddy trying to make his way to him with the spear, and he told the whole party, looked at the whole party and said, "This is the man who's trying to cross from Europe over into Asia. He can't even cross from one side of this room to the other." Like, straight up roasted his pops in front of his own fucking marriage, at his own marriage ceremony. He wasn't taking no prisoners on the battlefield or in the roast game. And this incident put an even bigger strain on Alexander's and Philip's relationship. And Alexander and his mom were actually exiled from Macedon in 337 BC, probably partly because of that. I mean, dog, you saying the quiet part out loud, you calling the king out his name. If you wasn't his son, you would probably be already dead, fam. Like, you gotta go, fam. Sorry. Like, it's not you, it's us. But the exile didn't last long. because Philip needed a rightful heir to his throne, at least until his newest born son from Cleopatra, Eurydice, was old enough. So Alexander was convinced to return, but his mother was not allowed to, so she stayed with her brother Alexander I of Epirus. And in the summer of 336 BC, Philip was attending the wedding of Alexander's blood sister Cleopatra of Macedon. There was a lot of Cleopatras back then, goddamn. But she was getting married to Olympias' brother, which to me sounds like there was some twisted branches on that family tree, if you smell what I'm cooking. I don't know though. But at this wedding, Philip is assassinated by the captain of his bodyguards, Pausanias of Orestis. And there are several theories. There are a couple theories on why Pausanias killed Philip. One theory is that Philip and Pausanias were special friends, the kind that watched Brokeback Mountain together, if you feel me. But apparently Philip had a thing for dudes named Pausanias, because he found another special friend named Pausanias who was very close to Attalus. Yes, the same Attalus who had insulted Alexander and was the uncle of Philip's new wife and son. So, according to Aristotle and other sources of that era, Pausanias of Orestis mocked the new Pausanias in front of the king. In front of King Philip. So this led to the new Pausanias. He tried to prove himself in battle, and he fucking died. So this pissed off Attalus. So he set up Pausanias of Orestis. He got him blackout drunk at a party and sexually assaulted him, and then let some of the king's mule drivers do the same thing. And allegedly King Philip was the host of the whole party and the whole event, so he kind of knew what was going to happen and all that, and he was kind of cool with it, supposedly. Now this is just rumor and hearsay, but I don't know, them Greeks was into some freaky kind of revenge, like goddamn. But this supposedly led to Pausanias carrying a grudge against Attalus and the king, of course. And the thing is, these events, the things that happened to Pausanias and the murder of the king they took place 8 years apart, which, I mean, to me doesn't really make sense for Pausanias. I mean, if you're gonna wait so long to get your get back on the king for something so slanderous and disrespectful, like, you wouldn't try and get back sooner, like just risk you're gonna die anyways trying to fuck with the king. So I mean, might as well get your get back. But 8 years, I don't know if I buy all that whole grudge and that. 8 years is a long time. Maybe it was building up, and maybe he just had the right person kind of nudge him in that direction, like, hey, you remember when the king kind of did that to you? That wasn't cool, bro. You should kind of get some get back for that. But I don't know, who knows. Judging by the events of what happened after Philip's death, here's what I believe happened. So Alexander went into exile, took his mom with him, and Alexander took his mom to her brother, who was the king of Dodona, Greece, and then Alexander himself went to the kingdom of Illyria. And despite beating them a few years earlier in battle, he was treated like a guest of honor. He was treated with real respect type shit. So keep in mind, even when Alexander returned, the way lineage worked out in Macedon was that even though Alexander was the oldest son, he wasn't pure Macedonian, and his baby half-brother would take the throne, and Alexander wouldn't be shit, probably would get killed when he was old enough. So Alexander comes back, and at the wedding of Philip's daughter to Alexander's uncle, Philip gets assassinated by Pausanias, and while Pausanias was trying to escape, he tripped and fell, and instead of interrogating him, two of Alexander's friends kill Pausanias, make sure he can't say nothing, and figure out why he would do such a thing. Now, another interesting detail is that there was a getaway horse or getaway horses waiting for where Pausanias was running to. So, just a little interesting detail. There was definitely a setup. This was not on some like active revenge. This was clearly planned according to the sources. Now, whether or not Alexander and his mom lined up the king, that's up for debate. But for me, no one had more to gain. Like, no one had more to gain than Alexander. And the way everything lined up for him is it's just a little too perfect, Just a little too perfect, if you ask me. But the fact is stranger than fiction, you feel me? Plus, when Philip died, Alexander was declared king on the spot. There was no arguments, no nothing. Olympias returned to Macedon, and together they started consolidating power. Meaning, Attalus had to go, so did Cleopatra, Eurydice, and the kid, buddy, sorry. 2 kings who were thought to have conspired to kill King Philip were put to death, and the reign of Alexander the Great, now Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, would begin. Now, I ain't going to go into great details about the battles Alexander fought in or his strategies, because I could be here all day breaking that shit down, but I'm going to try to summarize all that as best as I can. So, before Alexander and his forces crossed into Asia Minor, he wanted to make sure he wasn't attacked from the north, so he conquered the Balkan territories by 335, and then from there he went back to Greece and began to march into the Persian Empire, just like him and his father had planned years earlier. Then Alexander and his forces marched from Greece into Turkey and secured the coastal cities in 334 BC. Now, according to Greek historians, and they really like to romanticize history, according to them though, as soon as Alexander touched down on Asian soil, he threw a spear into the sand or the soil or whatever, and that was pretty much an indication like he knew he was going for world domination. He wanted to conquer Asia Minor. This is what him and his father had been planning. And even if he didn't really literally throw his spear into the soil, it was clear that when he landed there, he wanted all the smoke. He wanted all the smoke with these pyramid building, elephant riding Persian mink bastards. He was trying to take over their shit and make that shit his own. And after securing the ports and all that, Alexander and his troops moved inward to the modern day Middle East, and they started kicking stands like Shawn Michaels, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iranistan, and Iraqistan. All of them fell to the great Alexander, and during his conquest, Alexander was in the city of Gordium, and it was here where he untied the Gordian knot, which was supposedly an impossible knot to untie, and whoever untied it was destined to rule over Asia. But he didn't really untie it. He just cut that motherfucker. Like, he kind of cheated, but he solved the riddle. So, I mean, did he really cheat? Who really knows? And I don't really know too much about the whole Gordian knot mythology or what the whole historicity behind that is, but seemed pretty important at the time for him to do it, especially if it was destined for whoever cut it to rule over Asia. So in the spring of 333 BC, after recovering from an illness, Alexander set his sights on Syria and the Levant, and there is where he finally came face to face with the king of Persia, Darius III, who was basically Alexander's greatest foe. And Alexander knew he had to capture the Persian king alive in order to show everybody that this was his empire now. And despite being outmanned and outmaneuvered, Alexander's forces waited for an opening in the Persian flank, and then they used their speed to get behind Darius's troops and force the king of Persia to flee the battlefield. And he left behind his wife, children, mama, and a whole bunch of treasure. Now, here's where the true 4D chess mind of Alexander comes into play. Like, instead of taking the king's family as ransom or treating them as prisoners, he made sure that they were safe and had the same luxuries, the same exact luxuries they had when they were ruling. Now, this sent a message to not only King Darius, but the world. And the message pretty much was, I got y'all's royalty chilling with me, drinking Macedonian wine. And no, that's not like a euphemism or anything, but they drinking Macedonian wine, eating figs and shit. Like, see, we're not all bad people. We out here chilling. We could be cool. You see me fucking y'all up, you might as well just be cool, you know? So after Alexander captured the Persian royal family, Darius would try to negotiate a peace treaty for his family back, and Alexander really wasn't having none of that. Fuck boy trying to talk it out. What the fuck we finna talk about? All we know is that Gucci, Louis, Mula, Fendi. Like, bruh, I don't even know. Hey, shout out motherfucking OG Mako. But Alexander wrote him back and basically said that I got your fam, I beat you in battle, I'm not done conquering your shit yet, so hell no, we not discussing no peace. What the fuck is, what peace for what? Unless you're trying to just hand over all your shit, but I know you ain't trying to do that. So this led to Alexander chasing Darius, however you pronounce it. He chased him all around the Fertile Crescent, conquering the walled island of Tyre, Egypt, and Mesopotamia along the way. He would also defeat Darius in battle again, but again Darius escaped capture, and he was actually trying to gain support for a third battle against Alexander. But before he could, get all of his troops together, his own homies would arrest him and tie him up and throw him in a cart as a prisoner. They was done. They said, bro, we done losing, bro. You don't got the answers. You're not him. And while they were trying to flee, Alexander caught up with them, and they panicked, stabbed Darius, and then left him for dead. The thing is, though, is that Alexander really wanted to capture Darius alive. He really wanted to show people. He didn't really want Darius dead. This wasn't a blood beef like that. He really just wanted to show people he was the new ruler and head honcho of the world type shit. It was just world domination business. It wasn't nothing personal. So he was really upset that Darius was killed, and he had the conspirators who killed Darius executed. And in 324 BC, he would marry one of Darius's daughters. That was effectively the end of the Persian Empire, and Alexander the Great was officially king of the known world. There wasn't nowhere on the planet that people were at the time, or at least in the civilized world at the time, that didn't know who Alexander the Great was, or what the Greek Empire was, because it was probably a part of it. In the spring of 324 BC, Alexander's best friend Hephaestion, whom he knew since childhood, he got sick and he died. And this devastated Alexander. There's actually evidence to suggest that Alexander and Hephaestion were extremely personal friends. And plus, I guess Netflix had just dropped a documentary not too long ago, and people were furious online. I'll go figure, people mad online. But there were people mad that they portrayed Alexander as bi or even homosexual, or that he was even kissing a man. And think about this, y'all. Alexander's dad had 7 wives and had 7 kids. Alexander had 1 heir and a few wives, maybe, but there's evidence that suggests that Alexander preferred the company of dudes, bruh. Now, regardless of the man's sexual preferences, he was one of, if not the greatest war general in history before guns were invented. There's a little asterisk when guns get involved and shit like that. But before guns involved, the greatest ancient battle mind strategist, all that, Alexander. And I mean, another person I'll get to in another video, Genghis Khan, is another one. Put either one of them up there. Before guns were invented, there's not a great military strategist like that. Now, and Alexander, one of, if not the GOAT, 0 losses, 0, 22 dubs recorded. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that bisexual motherfucker knew how to work a stick. Pause. No Drizzy, no Diddy, all that. But facts. Unfortunately for Alexander, his grand plans to successfully merge the Eastern and Western cultures never really came into fruition. But really, he was on some NWO Illuminati type shit before they were even known. Like, he was trying to create a one world government. But soon after Hephaestion's death, Alexander grieved profusely, and then he got sick too. Now, there's several theories. There's a couple theories regarding Alexander's death, whether or not it was depression, years of alcoholism and battle like Attila, or a combo of all those. There are also speculations of poisoning, and really my personal favorite is that he may have been pronounced dead prematurely. And what I mean by that is there are some historians that propose that Alexander contracted the, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's the Guillain-Barré, Guillain-Barré, or Guillain-Barré. I don't know how you pronounce it. But the Guillain-Barré, which it's a rare disorder that fits the symptoms of Alexander. It fits what he had before he died. And if he really had it, this would mean that eventually he would be temporarily paralyzed throughout his whole body. And by temporarily, I mean 6 months to a year, give or take. And after Alexander was pronounced dead, I mean, Plutarch mentions in his writings that Alexander's body hadn't shown any signs of decay. Even after a week of quote-unquote, being so-called dead, Keep in mind, they didn't know what the fuck a pulse even was. They didn't have, hospitals back then. They didn't, like, during this whole period, they were getting up for days. If your body was cold, then it was dead enough for them. If you didn't have a quote unquote pulse, or if you didn't move, yeah, bro, we gonna bury you. Sorry. And if they really did pronounce Alexander dead when he was still alive, that also means that he was alive when they began the mummification process. It wasn't just, no, oh, we accidentally buried bro, my bad. No, they disemboweled him. The whole taking the brain out of mummies is a whole myth, in case y'all didn't know, just the FYI. But they did have to disembowel him in order to begin the mummification process, and that meant that if he was still alive when they pronounced him dead, he was alive for the whole process. I mean, either way you slice it, though, pardon the pun, Alexander was pronounced dead on either June 10th or June 11th, 32 BC, and after his death, they were going to take his body to Macedon. But one of his generals put a swiper on him and took his body to Memphis instead, and then transferred it to Alexandria. And there are stories of Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus visiting Alexander's tomb, and Emperor Caligula supposedly took Alexander's breastplate from his tomb. But after 200 AD, details of the location of Alexander's tomb become really sketchy. And although we've found Hephaestion's and King Philip's tombs, we haven't found the tomb of Alexander the Great yet. And of course, I mean, he had no rightful heir to the throne when he died, and never named a successor. Alexander's the Greek Empire crumbled into 4 different kingdoms, and supposedly this whole thing, Alexander's reign and the kingdom dividing into 4, was prophesied by Daniel in the Bible. But there's room for debate on whether or not Daniel actually existed and when these prophecies were written. But if true, Daniel foretold Alexander's rise to power and then sudden death 200 years beforehand. And regardless, Alexander had a dream and ambitions to conquer the world, and he did just that. He brought Roman and Greek cultures together into the Fertile Crescent, and for the next couple hundred years, Rome and its leaders would have a significant impact on politics in the Middle East. But as the Roman Empire never had another leader like Alexander, despite that, the empire lasted until 1456 AD, and it became a precursor to modern democratic governments. Alexander's story and influence, though, has survived through the ages, and some may wonder how we have a full biography on Alexander, but we don't know anything about Jesus' teenage years or his 20s. But Jesus didn't become a religious figure or symbol, and didn't really get really famous until after he died. And I mean, despite Alexander living 100 years before, he lived 100 years before Jesus' death. He was literally the most famous, most powerful, and most richest man in his era. So it makes sense why they would have, or why we would have, more info on Alexander. More people obviously knew him in his peak, in his prime, really. So it makes sense to me why we know more about Alexander, despite him living hundreds of years before Christ. But in closing, Alexander the Great was the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be in terms of military prowess and just being diplomatic, like I said at the beginning. And he's truly a legend in history. And if y'all enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like. If you leave a dislike, you can leave a dislike too. You know, maybe comment. You know, I enjoy criticism. I'm always trying to get better and all that. But you know, if you did like it, you know, maybe leave a like on what you liked, or maybe leave a comment on a historical figure that I should cover in the future. And like I said, if you enjoyed this, I got more historical content dropping soon. So if you want to stay tuned, y'all could, you know, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss none of this hot content that I got dropping soon. You feel me? It's been your boy A.N.T. repping the motherfucking gang, all that shit. And y'all be safe. Don't get smoked. I'm out. Peace.